episode 31 of the podcast. This week, we're going to ask the question, do we need to change grooming? Does grooming need to change? Does training need to change? Do we need to change how they interact together? And we're going to discuss some of those points. This is the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, and a certified professional dog trainer. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. This week's question is, do we need to change grooming? Do we need to change the grooming process? So I'm kind of coming from a couple different points of view. One is from the training point of view, because I think that a lot of trainers are kind of under the impression that groomers should just do this, groomers should just do that. And then the grooming point of view, which is dogs should just be trained. And they shouldn't have a problem with grooming. And all right, both sides are kind of right, and both sides are kind of missing parts of the bigger problem. But let's talk. Do we need to change grooming? And I'm going to say maybe, right? Things are constantly changing. And I know for myself, I started off working for other people. I've worked in shops. I've worked on a van. I work as a house call groomer. I changed my own grooming process. I changed my own grooming procedures. I changed my policies. And because of that, the dogs that I groom are safer, I'm safer, and my customers are happier. So through my own business stuff, I've decided that, all right, I needed to make that change. Now, do you need to change yours? I don't know. It's hard to say. Are you as happy as you want to be? Are your dogs happy? But I think that many of us are here because we're thinkers. Like we're problem solvers. We see something that we want to change, that we want to make it better. So the fact is that I think that there are a lot of neat things going on right now, and that's going to make things change. And I think that that's good. So, I think that, so let's list off some of the things that are going on in the dog world right now. Because here in 2019, May of 2019, there are a couple things going on in the dog world. And one of those things is that we're learning so much more about dogs. For a long time, dogs weren't really studied. It was just too difficult because they're house pets. And it was very hard to have kind of a lab setup to know what house pets know. But there have been some changes in that. And I don't know if you're familiar with Brian Hare or the Canine Cognition Project, but that's an awesome source. And I believe he wrote The Genius of Dogs. Brian Hare, Hare. I think it's The Genius of Dogs. Excellent book. But he started proposing that, well, wait a minute. You're saying that only some animals know how to do that, but I'm pretty sure my dog knows how to do that. And it's an interesting way of looking at things now that somebody has started researching, well, what do our dogs know? And what we're finding is that dogs are pretty unique, which many of us already knew. I really don't know why everyone is so fascinated by wolves, because dogs are at least as cool as wolves. At least. Dogs are awesome. But we are studying dogs more. And actually, the Canine Cognition Project is pretty cool because if you go on there, there are a lot of things that you can be doing with your own dog. There are a lot of let's test my dog and see how my dog responds, how my dog learns. But we're learning a lot more. And I'm also going to list another author. Sadly, he passed away pretty recently, but Raymond Kopinger, who studied dogs that are not pets. Plenty of dogs in the world are not pets. They live near people, they live around people, but they aren't necessarily pets. And that gives a different insight into how our dogs think, right? Now, when we talk about every animal being an individual, that helps us realize, oh, wait, if we know more about the way that animal thinks, then we have a much better chance of helping that animal learn. So because some of this research is now so easy for all of us to get our hands on, right? Raymond Kopinger, I know he has books. If you go to Amazon, you can find books by Brian Hare, Raymond Kopinger. But those are two that I'm going to tell you about this week. But because we're learning more, we're also learning more about how to teach the dogs now that we understand them better. And there's so much information out there about how to teach dogs, and it's fascinating. And there are a billion different ways to do it, right? So, well, you guys know I teach with positive reinforcement, but that doesn't necessarily mean clicker training because I'm not a clicker trainer. I'm a SATS trainer. There are lots of different ways to teach things. I've actually kept up to date, or at least I feel like I've kept up to date on what everybody's doing in various areas of the dog training world, right? Like the e-collar people and stuff that I don't use. Oh, and groomers, e-collar is the electronic collar. That's what I'm referring to, not the Elizabethan collar. Because I know sometimes that gets confusing. I think a lot of groomers call e-collars the Elizabethan collars or an e-collar, the cone. But the electronic collars, like something that I don't use, but I kind of watch and listen and learn, like, oh, this is how they're being used, and these are the kind of results people are getting, and how interesting. And I wonder how I feel about that. And that's okay to ask. How do I feel about that? Is it better or more efficient? Is what I'm doing better or more efficient? Is there something about that process that I can take to the process that I use? So there are lots of different things going on right now in the animal world, and that's pretty cool. Now, the third thing that's really cool that's going on in the animal world right now, or at least here in the United States, is that here in the United States, the modern dog owner is super into their dogs. And many of them are willing to be educated about what they need to know and work on their problems. I mean, if we tell them there's a solution set, they're like, great, where is it? How do I find it? What do I need to do? Right? They're really into their dogs, and dogs are family members in a way that they not necessarily were back when we were kids, or back even 15, 20 years ago, like that. I know I can't make assumptions about everyone's age, but even just in the last like 15 years, it's become very, very different. And so when we talk about the modern dog owner, some of the things that we used to do in grooming shops was kind of based on this idea that, first of all, we weren't real sure that a dog could learn it. Okay, and I'm going to say that but I know many of us as groomers kind of learned how to do trimming and do baths and do grooming on dogs who were behaving poorly because we just figured, what, I wish they had taught this dog as a puppy, right? And now we're finding, gosh, wait, no, we still have time to teach it, right? Many, many dogs can still learn. So some of the things that we had assumed or we had been taught, we've expanded on, right? Like, oh, now we know better. Cool. And now we have these owners who are like, yeah, okay, I'm willing to do that. We have more ideas on how dogs learn. Because, we talk about anthropomorphizing, which is assigning like human emotions to an animal. But I also find that there are times where a dog is scared and people are like, don't be anthropomorphic. He's not scared. They don't get scared like we do. But that's not really true either. Not every emotion is being anthropomorphic. Dogs can certainly be scared. They can certainly be frightened. And we can look at that, we can observe that, and we can measure it, right? A stress response is something that we can measure. Maybe not through cortisol levels, but a dog that's trembling, cowering, like we can see that. That's not anthropomorphizing. That's an absolute, this dog is in some stress. Right? We might not know in his head that he's thinking, oh, I hate this, but but we can definitely tell when an animal is stressed. But now we're learning more about behavior and we're learning more about the body language. To give you an example, I know many of us were taught as little kids, at least, like a wagging tail means a happy dog, but that's just not true. A wagging tail means an exciting dog. That could be agitated, excited. That could be aroused, excited. That could be angry. That could be thrilled. Like that just means excitement. It doesn't necessarily mean happy. So when we talk about the dog world right now, the other thing that we've got going on too, the fourth thing, because, of course, the first one was that we're learning so much more about dogs. The second is that we're learning more about how to teach dogs now that we understand them better. The third is the modern dog owner just being super into their dogs. But this fourth one, we have access to new tools, technologies, things that help the process go smoothly, maybe more efficiently, maybe more quietly. I remember when I first started working with dogs, we didn't have a high velocity dryer. and I don't mean to make it sound like I'm crazy old because I'm not. So, but we didn't have a high velocity dryer. So we used to like squeeze the dogs out, but actually like teach them to shake so that they'd shake and then we could towel them off more. And when we'd teach them to shake again and they'd towel off more. God, I'm glad we got away from that. Of teaching dogs to shake, spending a day getting a golden retriever dry. But now that we have these high velocity dryers, we have things like Clipper Vacs, we have Happy Hoodies, we have not just the grooming loop above, but we have like the oh crap, what's the term? Oh, I forget. And I should probably edit that out, but I won't. But an attachment piece that goes from the neck so they can be clipped from above and clipped to the side, almost like cross ties, so that they can remain still on the table and not have a whole lot of space to spin. We just have a whole lot more equipment, and a lot of those things make life quite easy, which is nice, you know? I mean, I didn't go back to the point where we didn't have detachable blades. I was lucky enough that we were already into the Oster, golden A5s. but like time goes on, things get a lot easier, and because of that, we're also using shampoos and sprays to help dogs dry faster. There are a lot of neat things that are out there right now. So, do we need to change the grooming? Do we need to change the grooming process? So, from a grooming point of view, I would say that's an interesting question. Now, from a training point of view, I would say that it's more about learning more about the dogs and learning more about the grooming process. And we're going to continue that in the next part. If you're enjoying my podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. So continuing with what we were talking about with do we need to change? So I think that many trainers are used to breaking things down into very, very small pieces. And I know a lot of groomers aren't really used to that. So one of the ways I describe that to my customers is when little kids are playing t-ball, like you learn how to hit a ball that's not moving, partly because you're not real skilled at batting yet, and none of your teammates know how to throw a ball, right? So even if you're learning like a game like baseball, breaking it up into its smallest bits, even if those don't look like the final game yet, right? So the kids are learning how to hit a ball that's not moving. The kids are learning how to throw a ball to each other. The kids are learning how to catch a ball. Eventually, one of the kids is getting pretty good at throwing a ball to someone who's going to try to hit it while it moves, right? Another example I give my owners is if you're learning a musical instrument, you usually break it down into really, really small pieces, right? So because I already know a couple of instruments, when I pick up a new one, I get a different baseline for where I'm starting. And that's kind of an interesting point that I think trainers kind of forget about, that a lot of dogs don't need training for the entire thing, right? It's a very individual amount of training, right? Most dogs are living in a home with lots of loud noises. They aren't scared of noise. They're scared of sudden bursts of noise, or they're scared of being startled or surprised by noise, but not necessarily noise. And that's one of the biggest examples that I hear trainers talking about, like, oh, of course he's scared. I mean, it's a loud dryer or a loud vacuum. And but almost like the musical instruments, if you started me with, okay, we're going to learn an instrument, and this is what the staff looks like, and this is how you find an F. This is low F, the F above middle C. I'd be bored out of my mind because I already know that part, right? Now, if you start telling me this is where you find an F on the fretboard of a ukulele, and this is the F above middle C, and this is where it is, now I'm learning something new. Or this is how you find the F above middle C on a clarinet. Now I'm learning something new. But we have to kind of meet our learner where they are. And that's kind of where training needs to adapt to the grooming process, because I think there are a lot of assumptions out there that the whole darn thing is scary and that we need to start off and use lots and lots of food and lots of counter conditioning and desensitization, and make them feel comfortable with every part of every little thing. And if only groomers weren't so scary, if only the grooming room wasn't loud. But I think that most dogs handle the grooming situation really quite well. So trainers, you're seeing the dogs that couldn't handle it very well. And we certainly need to break it down to where they can handle it. But when we start talking about a new dog, we need to start thinking, okay, well, what does this dog know? And maybe we should assume that this dog is going to be fine for it. Maybe we should. As a groomer, I do. I mean, I'm watching and I'm generally assessing as I go, but I'm working under the assumption that most dogs can handle it because that is my experience. Most dogs can. Now, does that mean that trainers should change what they're doing? No, it just means that we need to individualize it more, right? And groomers, I don't want you guys thrown under the bus with the whole, oh, well, groomers just need to do this, or groomers just need to do that, or grooming is just too stressful. And you know what? For some dogs, it may be too stressful. For some dogs, it may be too loud. But if we as groomers are thinking about ways that we can minimize that and we have an awareness of what those particular dogs need, then we can also make some changes. One of the things that I tell people is if they have a dog who is nervous, they shouldn't be bringing their dog in on a super busy day, right? Like don't have your nervous dogs in on the weekend. And people will complain. They'll say, "Oh my God, how am I ever supposed like I'm supposed to take some time off for my dog?" And but you know what? The fact of the matter is, if there's no Saturday or Sunday available for them, you'd be surprised how many people can take a couple hours off of the morning and off of the afternoon on one day, right? They can do it. They can do a Tuesday. They always find a way. Don't be apologetic about it. And it's not forever. If we teach a dog to be good for grooming, it's not going to be forever. It's going to be for a while we do the foundation work to help this animal feel comfortable, right? Calm, comfortable, and cooperative. And then eventually they're going to be able to handle that Saturday. For most dogs, maybe not all of them. So there are plenty of dogs that do best if there's not much going on. Like, you know, the ones that you might want to book for a Wednesday afternoon. You know, like, okay, special for this particular dog. I'm going to have you come in at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday after a bunch of other dogs have already gone through. You're going to be my last appointment of the day. You know, like think about ways that we can help minimize some of the stressors that a dog may be feeling or that we've already assessed that this dog finds stressful. But each dog, like I said, is so different. And that's part of what is really changing in the dog world is thinking about behavior as one individual's reactions to things that are happening around them or to them, you know, but to think about ways that we can make it easier, that also helps us think about, well, do we need to change some of our processes, right? Grooming isn't necessarily something that's going to be able to change a whole lot because the fact of the matter is that soap and water are necessary. Trimming, some sort of hair cutting is going to be necessary. But if we can space things out differently, if we can use products that help things go smoother, if we can use products and that help things dry faster, if we can use equipment that's maybe quieter, you know, we have lots of things that we can modify. And if trainers are really knowledgeable about the grooming process, then they can do a nicer job of preparing dogs for the grooming process. And also, if we work together, we get this opportunity for us all to kind of be on the same page. Like, well, what I found was he was fine with this, he was fine with this, he was fine with this, he was fine with this. This part of the grooming process, he acted this way. And a trainer can take that and say, interesting. So there's a whole bunch this dog could handle, but this part wasn't quite enough. This part they didn't have enough information about, so we're going to need to help them out with it. So I want you to be thinking about working together, and that's one of the changes in the grooming industry. I really think it should be, because we can't be everything to everyone. We've been taken advantage of far too long. We have a lot of customers that will try to get us to do stuff that's not our job, and we need that to stop. Like, don't worry if they can't afford to go to the vet. That's not your problem. If a dog needs a vet, they need the vet, and they need the vet. They don't need you to do vet work, right? If they aren't going to work with their dog, do what everybody else does and says, I'm sorry, that's just not the way dog ownership works. I can't help you if you're not willing to work on it at home too. right? We need to be thinking about that. And that's part of what's changing in the grooming industry. And I think that's progress, right? Because it's better for the dogs, each individual dog. We're thinking about all of them separately, and we're taking what we know about other dogs and applying it to individuals, right? So I want you to be thinking about that. Changing our business isn't necessarily all at once. It's these little things we do over time. And if you make big changes, cool beans. There have been a couple times I made big changes, and yeah, I had to be really brave to do it. It was a little scary, right? So I want you to be thinking about this week. I want you to think about finding out more about things like the Canine Cognition Project. And I would love it this week as your weekly action step, right? To look up Brian Hare and Raymond Copinger, because I think that if there's a book to pick up, it's probably Brian Hare's book. I think that you guys would get a different point of view on what we know about dogs at this point, because he's kind of in the forefront and a bunch of research about it. And I think that that'd be really, really helpful for all of us. It'll help trainers and groomers be on the same page and asking the same kind of questions. So anyway, have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like to talk to me, you can find me through my grooming and training business, happycrittersdogtraining.com, my email, chrissy@happycritters.net, and through the Creating Great Grooming Dogs Facebook page. And we have these awesome devices in our pockets that allow us to do live video with each other. I can help you with the dog on your table. We can set up live lessons, and you may be surprised at how much we can get accomplished together via video. I'm also happy to come to you if you're near my area in southern New Hampshire.